I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this is episode number 41. Today in the show, we're joined by Kip Adams to discuss the current state of whitetails in North America. This is a discussion you're not going to want to miss. All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. And today, as I mentioned earlier, we've got a great guest and an important topic to discuss. Joining me and Dan today is Kip Adams, who is a certified wildlife biologist and the Director of Education and Outreach for the Quality Deer Management Association. But on top of that, in my opinion, he's just simply one of the most knowledgeable and well-spoken people I've met on the topic of whitetail deer. That said, part of his role at the QDMA is to study trends and issues across the whitetail world and to help educate hunters about what's happening. And that's exactly what we want to discuss with Kip today. In many states, especially in the Midwest right now, we've been seeing rapidly declining deer herds and harvests, and many other challenges are arising across the country along with that. And the end result has been one of the roughest patches in the whitetail world in decades. So, with all that being the case, we're going to bring Kip on the line here in a minute to discuss all of this and more. But first, Dan, are you ready for this?
I hope so.
Me too. You think this is going to be an interesting conversation?
Yeah. I've always kind of found this really interesting because, there's a lot of statistics to back up people's arguments of what is good and what is bad for the quote unquote deer herd. But I don't know. I love it's a lot of it's objective as well because it comes down to.
You mean subjective?
Yeah, subjective. That's right, subjective, objective, subjective. Anyway, don't delete that out because it makes me sound real.
Right, and you, if anything, Dan, you are real. That's
real. You. So a lot of it's subjective. So I'm curious of what he has to say on some of that.
Yeah, I think if. I don't know how much you've been tuned into this, but because as some people know, I've been working with the National Deer Alliance over the last 4 or 5 months. I've been privy to a whole lot of feedback from a lot of hunters from across the country, and there is just a tremendous upswell of concern about whitetails over the past year, more than I've ever heard. Of course, there's always been complaints every year from different factions, but it seems like now there's definitely kind of a perfect storm of new challenges and issues that are affecting deer in a lot of places and hunters. And it's an interesting time to be a whitetail hunter. And I was actually working on a larger article for a magazine on this very topic too, and have interviewed a bunch of biologists and different professors and wildlife agency representatives and officers, and getting a whole bunch of different perspectives on this. And if there's anything I can take away from all of that, it's that there's definitely something going on here. Like, things are definitely changing. And that being the case, I think Kip is going to be the perfect guy to talk to about what's happening at that larger level. As I mentioned in that little intro there, with Kip's work at the QDMA, from what I understand and from conversations with him and others, he's really responsible for, talking to all the biologists, talking to the hunters, talking to agencies, talking to all these different representatives across all kind of levels of the deer hunting world to figure out, what's going on out there, so that he can understand from a high level, from a 30,000 foot view, what are the trends, what are the issues, what are the challenges, and then he can start educating and we can start learning. So I know that Kip's been working on something called the Whitetail Report, which the QDMA puts out every year. And so I know he's been working on that recently, and that's going to be coming out here pretty soon, the new 2015 edition. And I think a lot of the things that they've compiled for that report we're going to be able to discuss here, and I think that's going to be pretty interesting. So I'm excited to hear what he has to say. I'm interested, and I'm definitely looking forward to hearing his perspective on all these different things. Because sometimes, there's kind of a doom and gloom perspective, especially recently from a lot of guys. And I'm curious to see what Kip's thoughts are, based on, all the hubbub that we've been hearing across the news and all media outlets really recently. So it's going to be good. I'm curious, Dan, what do you think from your experience? I understand you hunt, whitetails in one place, but how do you feel about the state of whitetails in the population and the herd, just given your personal views and experience?
Well, from just observing the areas that I hunt, and I've hunted them for years now, the population in my area, I feel, is down from previous years. I remember when I first started bow hunting, I'd sit in a tree stand and would see 15 to 20 different deer a night. And that's a lot.
Yeah.
This year, fast forward 10 years, and those numbers are down. But this year was the highest quality of bucks that I've ever seen in a hunting season, as far as an age class, through trail cameras and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And as far as numbers, I felt they're down. I almost felt like the properties that I was hunting had a bit of a swing as far as a ratio is concerned to more bucks than does. And I'm not 100% sure what the QDMA says the right ratio is supposed to be, but I would say it was over two bucks per doe.
Interesting.
And yeah, so for me, I feel I'm okay with lower numbers, higher quality.
Yeah. I think, an interesting thing here to take away from a little bit of what you just said there is the fact that, right, when I ask you the question, how do you feel about the state of whitetails right now? Mm-hmm. Your answer and your opinions are going to be based on your experience right there in your neck of the woods where you hunt, right?
Right.
And that's how it is for pretty much everyone. So when I ask, Bob from Indiana, what do you think about whitetails right now? What whitetail hunting, about the deer situation? They're going to give you their observations. Their opinions can be almost solely based on their observations right in their neck of the woods from the 10 times they went out, or the 20 times they went on their 40 acres or their 400 acres or whatever it is. And so you get a lot of people, and this is perfectly natural, but we all develop our own idea of what's going on and what the situation is and what the issues are, all based on our own personal experiences in our little neck of the woods where we hunt. But we all kind of get this little tunnel vision because our whole opinion on the issues or the situation is based on, our little piece of the pie. And so you get some people that are really upset, or some people that are really happy, or some people that are really concerned, or some people that are totally content, and it's all based on, this one kind of looking through a straw. They're looking through the straw at their little piece. And so you've got millions of hunters that are all kind of looking at the situation, the whitetail situation, through their little straw. And what I'm starting to see now that I've been involved with this organization is I'm trying to look at the bigger picture and seeing all the different perspectives and all the different issues and how they're different across all over the country. There's certain states where we're seeing some real, significant issues, and then there's other states where things are totally hunky-dory, at least at a high level. So it's an interesting time because things are really different. across different parts of the country. Some hunters are very happy. Some hunters are really upset. Some places populations are declining, and maybe that's a good thing because they were too high. Some places populations are rising, and maybe that's a good thing too because they're too low. There's just a lot of different things, and a lot of things are in flux. And I think, the point of me mentioning all that is that when we pull Kip on here in a minute, I think he's going to be able to give us this high-level overview instead of looking through a straw that I look through or that maybe you look through or, the average guy, one of our listeners. I think Kip's going to be able to give us a perspective that looks, not at the straw, but he's looking at the whole big gulp 84-ounce cup, and he can see the whole picture based on the fact he's been able to talk to people across the country and get those perspectives and look at the actual data, not just what Bill says, but, what all the numbers are saying. So I'm interested. I'm interested to see what the status is because I've been hearing people cry bloody murder, over the past 6 months or year or so, and for good reason in a lot of cases. The more numbers I see, the more concerned I get. But I want to see if Kip's going to give us a reality check or if he's going to say, hey, there are some issues. I don't know. So that said, what do you think about pulling Kip Adams on the line and just getting started with this conversation?
I say we get the party started.
All right, let's do it. All right, here with us now is Kip Adams. Welcome to the show, Kip.
Hey, thank you, Mark. Man, I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. We are, as we were just talking about a little bit earlier, we're really excited to talk to you. Given, everything that's been happening in the whitetail world over the last couple of years, there's, I think, a fever pitch of people talking about, how things are changing and some of the issues affecting deer across the country right now. And I know, given your work, you've got, some interesting perspective on that. Now, earlier in the show, I gave our audience a brief introduction to who you are and what you do, but I'd be interested to hear from you. Could you share with us a bit more about your background into what you've done to this point related to deer and deer management and kind of what you do now?
Sure. Well, I grew up in northern Pennsylvania, and I grew up in a hunting family, so I've always been involved with the outdoors. I spent my entire life in the woods and was very fortunate to learn early on that that's what I wanted to do for a career. So went to school, got a wildlife degree, went to University of New Hampshire for a graduate degree, and I spent the last 20-odd years either conducting research on deer or managing deer for state wildlife agencies, or for the last 13 working with QDMA. I have a unique perspective in that the first two jobs I had out of graduate school were for states. I managed a bunch of land in Central Florida for the Florida Game and Fish Commission, and then I went back to New Hampshire and took over as the state's deer and bear biologist for the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department. So that gave me a very good feel for what it takes to manage a statewide deer herd, all of the constituents that are involved, all of the issues that come in with that. You have to look at the biology of it, the social nature of it, the politics of it. So that helps me tremendously in my job with QDMA, working with state agencies and hunters and landowners, because I have a pretty good feel for all the factors that go into managing deer. Certainly a lot more than just the science end of it, and hopefully a little bit on how to be successful, meshing all of those stakeholders together to make a very successful program. Because at heart, I'm a deer hunter more than anything else. So I'm lucky to be a deer biologist, but I often say at my seminars, I am first and foremost a deer hunter, and so that's what's near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, I love that perspective that you bring, given your past experience as a biologist, also as a hunter, also in your role at the QDMA. You've got some really interesting experiences that I think give you, this almost 365-degree perspective that a lot of us don't have. You're able to see it from all these different angles. That said, can you tell us a little bit more about what you do now with the Quality Deer Management Association?
Sure. I'm our Director of Education and Outreach, and what that means is that I oversee our REACH program. And REACH is an acronym that stands for Research, Educate, Advocate, Certify, and Hunt. And those 5 things encapsulate QDMA's mission. So I'm lucky to get to work with a number of great people there, but oversee each of those components on what QDMA does on a daily basis, such as the research programs that we get involved with. We're able to secure funding from a few different sources to help put funds toward valuable research projects on deer and habitat. We help design some research projects. And the nice thing about it is, we do all of this with hunters in mind, in that it's really nice to know exactly how deer see or hear But we take the tack that, all right, let's look at that from a hunting perspective, and how can that help hunters when we help get involved with research projects. So I enjoy the research end. The educational end, that's really the horse that brought QDMA to the race. And so I get to help oversee all of the different educational programs that we have, whether that's stuff that's in print or in posters or DVDs or on television or on the web. We produce that stuff in a lot of different formats just because hunters today like to receive it in different ways. Older hunters tend to like to have something in their hands, a hard copy of something to look at, where a lot of younger hunters and youth hunters much prefer something on the web or something digital format. So we try to keep it exciting, try to keep it fresh so that we can provide information in a format that all hunters can use and enjoy and gain value from. The advocacy part is it's amazing the number of legislative bills that impact deer each year. Unfortunately, many of them would impact it negatively. So QDMA fights for hunters' rights like nobody else with regard to supporting good legislation, opposing bad legislation, and just making sure that we get good information to legislators to help them make good decisions on, hey, is this good for hunting or not? And we get involved with a lot of advocacy issues each year along those lines. And many people don't realize or don't have a clue what's going on out there with regard to legislation. And I certainly didn't before I was in this role, but it is amazing what's going on in that world that would directly impact deer management if a lot of that stuff did pass. From the certification end, we have certification programs both for individuals, which is what we call our Deer Steward program, as well as for a land certification program. And we have our programs manager, Matt Ross, who I know you know well, does a great job with that. But I get to work with Matt regularly to put on those programs, to speak at them, and to make sure that we're delivering the highest quality programs available to folks. And the last part is the hunt. That's our hunting heritage piece, and that's where our mentored hunting program falls into that. That's where our youth program, which we affectionately call the Rack Pack, falls into that. Hank Forster is our youth program manager, and we have a whole section on just kids and youth. That's about a lot more than just hunting. We certainly advocate to take kids hunting, but this is about just getting them to the woods, taking them fishing, teach them about the outdoors, let them explore. So our youth program is a really cool program that I'm fortunate to get to work with a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a terrific initiative too. I think the other thing I really take away from that terrific explanation is that you are a busy man, Kip. You are a very busy man.
That's a good thing, though. If I wasn't busy, that would be bad for deer. So, I love what I do. I'm very lucky to get to do what I do. So I'm glad there's so much out there. That means that deer are important and hunters are important, and so that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one more thing I know you also work on is the annual whitetail report that the QDMA releases each year. And, in past reports I've seen, that you guys look at a lot of the top issues and trends that affect deer across the country. And I know that you are wrapping that up right now for the new edition for 2015. So I'm sure you've been, diving deep into all these different topics that are, I think, of interest to hunters across the country, especially with the 2014 season just wrapping up and all the harvest numbers coming in. There's lots of people, having questions about why are these numbers the way they are, or what's happening to the whitetail herds, or are things going well, or are things going bad? There's a lot of questions. So, what I wanted to frame the majority of our conversation today around was this question of, what's the current state of whitetails in North America? So, to start, Kip, at a very high level, I'm curious, given everything you've been looking into and what you found and what you've heard, right now, what is your diagnosis of the state of whitetails in North America?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm an optimist, so I'll start by saying there's a lot of very good things going on with deer hunting and deer management right now. For instance, we know that this past year, we killed a record low percentage of yearling bucks in the harvest. Back in 1989, when we first started looking at this, well over 60% of all the bucks killed were just 1.5. Mm-hmm. And today that number has dropped to 36%.
Wow.
Lowest ever. And actually last year was the lowest ever, and this year, we beat a record again. So that's a very positive trend, with hunters passing deer. Some agencies obviously have regulations that require hunters to pass the majority of yearling bucks, but above and beyond that, there's just a lot of hunters that willingly pass those 1.5-year-old deer, and so I think that's a very positive sign for the future of hunting and for deer management, and something that's directly related to education, over the past decade or so. So I think that is very good, and along with that, since we're protecting more yearling bucks, that means we're moving bucks into more older age classes, which is great for viewing, photographing, hunting, calling, etc. And this past year, we also set a record for the percentage of the national buck harvest that was at least 3.5 years old. So 3.5, 4.5, 5.5-year-old bucks. Nearly a third of all the bucks killed in the United States last year were at least 3.5 years old. And that is just amazing to think how far we've come in a very short period of time, moving deer into some of these older age classes. So hunters deserve a tremendous pat on the back, for that, and something that they should be very, very proud of.
That's terrific. Now, is there anything, that's on the optimistic side of things? Those are some positive numbers, and that's exciting to see, especially for someone, like me, who is excited about the principles of quality deer management and allowing those bucks to get to an older age class and how that changes the dynamics of the herd and the experience of the hunt and everything along those lines. Is there anything on the other end of the spectrum that is concerning that you're seeing over the, given your research recently for the state of our herd?
Yeah, there is, and this annual report that you talked about, we actually call it, it's kind of a State of the Union address for deer, and we look at the biggest issues each year and then talk about them in this, and we've been doing this since 2009, and each year there's certainly some top issues, whether it's a disease outbreak or a certain perspective that some group is taking on deer that impacts deer hunting, and but I can honestly say that the report that we're just finishing up right now, I think there's more pressing issues in that we haven't dealt with in the past than ever before, and some huge issues that we're going to have to face going forward as hunters and deer managers. And two of the biggest of that are declining deer herds in some areas. And, for a long time we've talked about just having way too many deer and are trying to reduce deer herds. And, a lot of people incorrectly equated QDM with just shooting all the does. But, quality deer management has always been about shooting the appropriate number of does, to balance those deer herds with the habitat. And I think that we're seeing some states now, that have been aggressively trying to reduce deer herds, which is a good thing, that maybe now have hit that balance point, and some that possibly have dipped a little too far below that. Good thing is, that's correctable, so that's a very positive thing. But now we need to educate hunters again to say, okay, we cannot have a record harvest every year. As we reach our deer population goals, we're going to have lower harvest. But I think there are some states out there that have such reductions in the harvest that, probably have gone a little too far and has a lot of hunters concerned, and rightfully so. And you know what? That region is clearly the Midwest is the epicenter of that. One of the chapters in the Whitetail report we looked at is the harvest data, both bucks and antlerless deer. And we look at that every year. How does this compare to last year, and 2 years ago? And what is the age structure of that? But we added a chapter this year that looked at where is it now versus where was it 10 years ago, kind of a decade look. And what we found is there is a huge change from a decade ago in some states. The Northeast is doing pretty well. It's very similar. The Southeast is very similar as a region. There's certainly states within there that are up or down. But overall, those are pretty close to what was shot now versus a decade ago. But the Midwest harvest in most places is just falling off the table. It is amazing what some of those states have gone through. And overall, shooting, almost 20% fewer bucks today in the Midwest as a decade ago. And a 20% drop, or almost, it's actually an 18%, but an 18% drop is a huge drop.
Wow.
So anyway, there's a lot of hunters concerned, and probably for good reason. Particularly, you can look at a couple of states, and then, in big deer hunting states where buck harvests are down over 40%, or almost 30%, that's a big deal. Particularly when you look at the antlerless harvest in some of these states is down even farther than the buck harvest. So there's a lot of issues right now with deer numbers in the Midwest, and so this is not the end of the story by any means. We're going to hear a lot about this in the coming months and likely the next few years.
Wow. So I've got two follow-up questions to that. Number one, you mentioned a couple states that are seeing, declines closer to 40%. What are these couple states that are the epicenter of these largest changes? I guess is my first question.
Actually, the state that had the biggest decline nationwide was Alabama, 55% reduction. But two things about that. I'll qualify. One, it's obviously not in the Midwest, but that state's reduction was more related to a buck bag limit change than actual deer herd change. Back in 2007-08 season, they went from, it used to be in Alabama, you could shoot a buck a day for the entire season. And they limited that to 3 bucks for the whole season. So that really changed. So it saved a lot of bucks, which is a very good thing. So that reduction is actually a positive for the deer hunting world, even though it looks like the biggest decline. But as far as the Midwest goes, the state that buck harvest declined the most, and it was a pretty big shocker, is Iowa. Iowa's buck harvest has dropped 43% in the last decade.
Wow.
So obviously a well-known big buck state, a very popular deer hunting destination for anybody that can get a tag and get in there. So 43% decline is a huge, huge deal.
So Kip, I'm not sure if you know, but Dan, my co-host, is an Iowa resident and hunter. So Dan, what's your reaction to hearing that? What do you think about that?
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
Well, you said 43%, right, Kip?
That's correct, yep.
Over the past decade. Now, and me and Mark had a short discussion about this before we got you on, and from my tree stand and my hunting properties, I only get to see a very small sampling of what is out there. And this year, I saw a smaller deer number, and I even said over the past 10 years, I saw a smaller deer number, but I saw higher quality bucks. Now, you said that the Iowa buck harvest over the past decade is down 43%. What kind of, I guess from a statistics standpoint, what are you taking into consideration to know that number is down 43%?
Each year for the Whitetail Report, we do a state wildlife agency survey. So we ask every single state wildlife agency's deer project leader a series of questions. And on that survey is we ask the number of antlered bucks that were killed that year or the year before, as well as the number of antlerless deer. And then we also ask age structure questions and all that. And unfortunately, Iowa DNR does not collect age structure data, so they could never give us the percentage of the harvest that was 1.5 or 2.5 or 3.5 and older. But they always give us the number of bucks and antlerless deer that are taken the year before. So those harvest numbers are straight from the DNR data that we just keep on an annual basis. And then, use to compare and make these type of analyses.
So from that 43%, I guess there's several different things that could, play in the role of that number. Are people passing? I know you mentioned this for Alabama, but is your guys' research showing that people are passing more deer? Is there, I don't know, disease involved? Is there less number of hunters? I guess it doesn't have to be Iowa specifically, but for the overall buck harvest decline, what are you guys seeing?
I think there's a couple things there. Disease has certainly played into that. 2012 was the worst hemorrhagic disease outbreak on record. And right before that, 2007 was the previous record outbreak. So disease certainly plays in. We've had some really bad winters recently that have played in. And in Iowa as well, if it was just people passing, certain bucks or something, that may play some into that. But from the antlerless harvest side, Iowa's antlerless harvest is down 52% during that same time period. So there's lots of talk out of Iowa about hunters just not seeing as many deer. And then a part of this is, Iowa has been trying to reduce that deer herd. 10 years ago, it was way above where it should have been. So, it should come down. And so I think, that the question then becomes not such that, the sky is falling here. It's just, okay, have we come down far enough, or are we to the point now where we need to stabilize this herd rather than continue to reduce it? So, but as far as why it's come down, I think there's a lot of factors. Disease has played in, winters have played in, obviously just hunter harvest has played in, as one of the goals for hunters to shoot a bunch. So that plays into that really big as well. But I'll tell you, I think my personal opinion is looking at not just Iowa but all of the Midwest. I think one of the biggest factors that has played into these huge reductions in deer herds is habitat loss. And if you take a look at the amount of CRP land that the U.S. has lost from 2007 to 2014, it's a huge decline. We've lost over 9 million acres of CRP in the U.S. during that time period. That's a full 25% of all the CRP land we had was lost since 2007, and well over half of that is directly from the Midwest. The Midwest has lost over 5 million acres. So if you look at a region that, one of the most critical habitat components anyway is cover, and now you're losing even more cover to go back into row crops. That really does not play well for whitetails at all. And so my professional opinion is we're really starting to feel some of the effects there of, the loss of this critical habitat that's directly playing into the productivity of some of these deer herds.
So, and I'm going to use Iowa, the 43% number that you said again, but because there is a decline in the population of the herd, and there's also what people would consider 43% less of a buck harvest, how does the QDMA then tell the public, don't worry about the 43%, less buck harvest, because it's not necessarily a bad number?
I'm not necessarily. Well, I think QDMA is not saying that's not. Don't worry about it, it's not a bad number. I think that's a huge number and something that they definitely should be concerned about. Buck harvest has dropped 5% or 10%. Okay, that's well within the limits of trying to reduce a deer herd. But you drop a buck harvest over 40% and a doe harvest over 50%, I think the red flags are flying like crazy and sirens are going off. Hey, something's going on here. We really need to take a look at this.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So a handful of different things there you mentioned, Kip, I would like to dive into further. And again, this whole topic of deer populations is something that's just, every day on social media, people are talking about it. New articles are popping up in, different news media outlets across the country. And it's definitely the topic that seems to be top of mind for a lot of people. So you mentioned habitat loss as a big possible issue. And that's something that a lot of people seem to be glossing over. When I hear a lot of people talking about this, they don't tend to mention that as one of the issues that they think is possibly affecting what's going on here. One of the largest typical culprits that I hear is the agencies are telling us to kill too many deer, right? They've been issuing too many tags, or they're trying to kill off all the deer because insurance companies want them to do that, or whatever it might be. So my question for you, Kip, is does that argument hold any weight? Is there any truth to that? what are your thoughts on the idea that, we can be pointing the finger at somebody like that or the agencies that they're just pushing too many does to be killed or too many deer to be killed?
Well, there's certainly more stakeholders involved today with agencies than in the past. Several decades ago, hunters were about the only stakeholders at the table. And today we have hunters, we certainly have the insurance agencies, we have farmers, we have the anti-hunters, we have homeowners associations. There's just a lot more people that have the ear of our DNRs today, to try to get their agenda passed. Now, as far as the insurance companies driving, all these deer harvests, I've been to literally hundreds and hundreds of public deer meetings over the years and state and federal level meetings, and I don't know if I've ever seen anybody from the auto industry sitting at that table with them. And, they're often talked about as being there, but the reality of it is, the insurance industries, they're not losing money when we hit deer. Our rates that we pay for auto insurance goes up if you live in an area that has more vehicle accidents. So I don't believe that holds much water at all. That's always talked about. People say that, but from my experience, I've just never seen it. Now, the flip side of that, how much of this is being driven by hunter over harvest? Most states out there over the past decade have been aggressively trying to reduce deer herds, or at least reduce them at some point during that decade. And so that certainly plays into this. That's not necessarily the fault of the DNR by any means. There was a time when, you almost couldn't slow deer herds down, particularly in the productive Midwest. They were just cranking out so many fawns, and so many fawns were surviving, and there was so much food that, man, you could throw everything you possibly could at a deer herd, and it would still grow. But over the last few years, now when you throw that disease on it, you throw some bad winters on it, at the same time that you pull all that habitat out from underneath it and you add more predators, I think it's just a mixture of all of these factors hitting in a very short period of time that suddenly changed the amount of harvest pressure we could put on some of these deer herds. So, is hunter harvest playing into this? Absolutely. And, I think there's many cases or places that we need to reduce the amount of animals we are taking, but I'm not placing the blame on the DNRs with these. I think it's just a new day or new era in deer management, where the rules have changed a little bit. So we just need to adapt to those.
So on that, I guess right along those lines of that point you made there, would you say, is it safe to say that for many hunters across the country, it's time to start adapting to a new normal?
Absolutely, or at least get a little more involved with what is happening, such that we can improve. If you're hunting in a poor situation right now, but yes, I think it clearly is a new normal with what's going on, especially with regard to the amount of antlerless deer that we need to remove now to stabilize deer herds.
So on this topic, then, it sounds like we need to be more involved. We need to, pay more attention to what's happening in our localized herds. And from everything I've gathered from talking to different people about this topic too, it just seems like more of the responsibility is going to be shifting to the hunter on the ground or the land manager to make sure that we personally are managing our local deer herds as best as possible, given all these different factors now that are coming into play that are localized in many cases. So, for example, maybe EHD hit really bad in my area. Well, now I need to start making some decisions from a management perspective about what's the right thing for this herd. And the state game agency might not be able to tell me what to do on my local 40 here because they don't know that's going on. So my question for you, Kip, is, and I think I know some of the answers here, but I'm curious to hear from your perspective, how can the average hunter better understand in their local area what the right number of deer to kill is, or what the right ratio of does to bucks should be? How can they start making these decisions better?
I think by collecting a little bit of data from the place that they either own or that they hunt on. We have a tremendous opportunity to do that today with trail cameras. Almost everybody has trail cameras, so you can collect some information just on the number of does that you're seeing. The number of fawns you're seeing in regard to the number of does. Two of the best ways are to do run trail cameras, but as well as just observation surveys while you're hunting. Keep track. Each day you go hunting and how many hours you hunt, and mark down the number of bucks and does and fawns that you see, and and compare that over time. Are you seeing more fawns per doe this year than in the past? If that's the case, that's a very good thing. Conversely, if you're seeing fewer fawns per doe year after year after year, that's a potential red flag that, hey, something's going on. We're not recruiting as many deer as in the past. So that's the first sign that, we can't shoot as many deer as we had in the past. So so you're absolutely right. The average hunter can take a much more engaged role in what's going on, regardless of what the bag limit is or the agencies tell us we can shoot. We can tailor our current situations to the number of deer that we're going to shoot, or allow others to shoot, on our property, or talk to the ones around us. So that's an absolutely perfect way for hunters to get involved. And along those lines, they also should get involved with the state wildlife agency. Talk to their local biologist, get involved with the DNRs, because more than ever, we need to be active and have open lines of communication, with the DNR to say, hey, here's what we're seeing, here's what's going on, tell us what you're seeing as well. One of the concerning things in doing this year's report, and it's very disappointing, but it's one of the biggest issues out there right now, is that we ask wildlife agencies to kind of rank the top issues that they're dealing with or that impact deer management. And and we've asked similar things of hunters, and hunters say right now one of the biggest issues out there are there's just no deer or very few deer. Deer densities have really dropped. You can ask the wildlife agents that same question. One of their top issues that they ranked was high deer density, too many deer. So
Wow.
when you have these two stakeholders with completely different views, polarized views of what is happening, that doesn't make for good, solution to these problems.
No.
So the only way to fix this is to get the agencies and the hunters to sit down and talk together to help each other, share views or see why they're coming from this. Because otherwise you're just going to sit there, and knock heads, and we're not going to get anywhere. And it does nobody any good for the agencies to say, there's more deer than we need, for the hunters to say, that's BS, I'm not seeing anything. And then you just lose credibility and you lose that relationship, and it all falls apart. And that certainly doesn't help anybody.
Yeah, I mean, it blows my mind that's happening, and a specific instance where I think this is happening right now to a degree, and I'm curious about your perspective on it, if you've followed this at all, is what's happening right now in Ohio. I don't know if you've seen some of the recent stories coming out of here, but there's been a series of meetings where some of the agency reps have been sitting down with hunters, and hunters sharing their feedback and others, and there seems to be a lot of contention here about the agency's goals of the deer population and what hunters think is the right goal to have there. Do you have any insight into that specific situation?
Yeah, I do, and I've been following that very closely as well, because historically Ohio has had a very, very successful deer management program. They have done a great job with numbers of deer and age structure of that deer herd. Obviously a very productive state, so the deer herd has been growing, over the last few decades. So they have been trying to reduce it, like many other states. One thing that Ohio has done differently than many, though, is that the agency has always been out in front with the hunters. Like Tonkovic, who is their deer biologist, is a very knowledgeable deer biologist. But one of the things that makes him so successful is he has always valued what the hunter said. He's always been out meeting with the public and meeting with hunters and listening and sharing information. So because of that, they've always had pretty good hunter support for what the agency has been trying to do, and they've been very successful at implementing new programs and new strategies, to keep that successful. So here over the last couple of years, all of a sudden, they're killing fewer deer there too, and some hunters are upset, and I understand that. As hunters, we tend to get upset when things aren't as good as we feel they should be. But what's been happening here over the last 2 or 3 weeks has really surprised me. Mike has really come under attack by some folks, and that just has not been that common in the past because of the relationship the Ohio DNR's had with hunters. So that's pretty strange there right now, and certainly a strange situation for that DNR to be in.
Interesting.
So when one side of the table says there's too many deer and the other side of the table says there's not enough deer, are both sides of the table bringing statistics that show, hey, there are too many deer, or hey, there's not enough deer?
Now, typically, there's one side is bringing data, and the other side is just bringing personal observations.
Yeah.
The agencies typically have data, harvest data, et cetera, to show what is going on. Hunters bring their personal views of what they saw or didn't see, and so you're not always comparing apples to apples. Now, one of the things that makes that conversation difficult is that wildlife agencies or state agencies manage at a deer unit or a wildlife management unit level, whether it's a county or a group of counties or whatever. But as hunters, we don't hunt at the unit level. We hunt at the property level. So within any given wildlife management unit, you have some deer herds that are well above what the habitat can support, others that are well below it, and some that are in balance with it. But so within a unit, you can find hunters that agree with what the agency says. Unfortunately, also within every unit, you also have hunters that say, that are just mad as heck because there's more deer and they're eating all their crops or their trees or their gardens, and hunters that have very few deer where they're hunting, so they're mad. So, the biggest discrepancy there is just the unit where the size of the unit that you're talking about in regard to numbers of deer. And, and as hunters, we often forget that, and agencies cannot manage to the property level. But as agencies, we often forget the same, that hunters don't realize, or at least agencies don't do as good a job as they could, explaining to hunters, hey, here's what we're seeing at the unit level. We understand you may not be seeing deer, and we feel bad about that, but let's at least try to understand what exactly we're talking about so that we can have productive solutions. And unfortunately, agencies get beat up a bunch, and I understand that. So we have too few agency members today that are very good at listening to the hunters, really listening to them. I'm not talking about just sitting there and letting the hunters say their piece, but really listening to what they're saying and then try to have a productive conversation. And as hunters, we make it easy for them to tune us out because there's a lot of hunters that just whine and cry when they're really not doing anything on their own part to try to make the solution better. So, I think the way we need to fix it is to draw a line in the sand and say, all right, let's just start all over here. Let's sit down together, and recognize that we both want to have healthy, productive deer herds, and let's work together to make that happen.
It definitely does seem like there's a serious communication just issue across the board in a lot of cases. And when you just laid out there what this great scenario could be if we could sit down, start from ground zero and start, talking from both sides and understanding each other. I'm curious, is that something that can realistically happen, or is that realistically happening anywhere? Kip, have you seen any really good examples of a state and a hunter population that has been able to develop that relationship?
Yeah, I have seen it, and actually I've seen it on numerous occasions. You end up with states that really involve the public, and Ohio historically has been one of those. Missouri is one of those in the Midwest, and there are others as well, that bring hunters in to be part of the stakeholder group for deer management plans. So, yes, it's not uncommon. There are numerous states that has done that, and that has been very successful. And the thing the hunters need to realize is it's the perfect opportunity for us to go in and be good partners, because the agencies certainly want us to partner with them. They really can't say this, but as much or more so than they do the homeowners associations and the anti-hunting groups and all of those. They have far more in common with hunters, so they have a much better vested interest to sit down and be good partners with us. So, so from the hunter end, it's the perfect time for us to do that and to get engaged. And so anyway, it's a long way to answer your question that, yes, I absolutely have seen it work and have seen it work beautifully.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Something I've seen too, as I've been working closer with the National Deer Alliance, I've been, tracking all sorts of different news stories related to deer across the country. And over again, I am hearing about these different opportunities where the agencies are sitting down with hunters for different meetings in Wisconsin or Ohio or Missouri or all these different places. And what I'm disappointed by, and I guess this is just how people are, but the participation is actually really low. There's thousands of hunters who complain or upset about the situation in their state, and then I see all these different examples where there is a meeting held to talk to people about it, and only 20 people show up. And I wonder if there's, to your point, Kip, there's an obligation to us, the hunters, to participate and to get engaged in these opportunities when they are there, because, hey, if they're putting it out there and we're not engaging, well, then we can only blame ourselves to a degree for not taking advantage of that opportunity.
No, that's right, and you hit the nail right on the head. When things are good, we tend to be complacent, and not go to meetings or not get engaged with those things. So, there's a lot of public meetings, lots of public input opportunities that go by the wayside, with very little public input. Now, one of the things that we looked at this in last year's whitetail report was, we asked agencies how they engage the public, and all of them did public meetings. And they took them other ways, but very few states, engaged the public through social media, and through some other more popular, more, I guess, timely ways to do that. And particularly for youth hunters or at least new hunters that are very tech savvy, that's how they get information today. That's how they want to be engaged. That's why at QDMA we provide information in those manners. I think the agencies would serve themselves well to also take advantage of some more of those means to engage the public. I think that you would get better engagement, or at least I would hope that you would. And but from the hunter side, they absolutely need to take opportunities to get engaged rather than just complain.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to shift now to another one of the challenges. Again, there's a kind of a few hot topics that I think a lot of people are talking about. We've talked about, possible over-harvest or agency issues or anything like that. That's when a lot of people talk about. Another issue, as you mentioned briefly earlier, is disease. Especially back in 2007 and 2012, we had the very large outbreaks of EHD. Can you talk to me a little bit, Kip, about, do we have any idea, is that something that's going to continue to be an issue? Is there any reason to be continually concerned about diseases like EHD or CWD? What's your thoughts on how that's going to be affecting whitetails moving forward?
Well, hemorrhagic disease is the most common disease of whitetail deer, and somewhere in the U.S. it breaks out every year, and deer are impacted. This year it was very easy. Virginia is one of the only states that had any hemorrhagic disease mortality this year, but that is going to continue. There's nothing that we can do about that. It's carried by insects. It's worse in hot, dry years, but that's always going to occur, and it's occurring more northerly than in the past. It used to be just a southern deer disease, and I vividly remember even when I was in college, in the late '80s, which wasn't all that long ago. That was specifically talked about as a southern deer disease. It just didn't occur in the north, or almost never. And but that's not the case today. It occurs, all the way to Canada today and across the U.S. And there are more strains, and in different strains. And so hemorrhagic disease is likely going to continue to increase its effects in the future, whether it's related to climate change or whatever. I don't know, but it's certainly expanded its range during the past decade. So yes, that will continue to be an issue. The thing is, it's natural. It occurs. All deer that get it don't necessarily die from it. So, and then they can pass some of that immunity on to their offspring to help protect them from it. So it's not a deal breaker by any means, but it's something we will continue to deal with. CWD, we definitely will continue to deal with that because there's no way to decontaminate a site once it has the disease or the prions. That disease continues to spread into new states, into new areas within states, throughout deer herds. There's so much research going on about CWD right now, but there's way more that we don't know about it than what we do. So that is going to continue to be a huge issue, mostly because every time a deer gets that, they die. There's no cure, there's no vaccine. It's 100% fatal. So unfortunately, with deer, they can carry the disease for several years in some cases without showing any signs of it, but simultaneously spreading or shedding, the prions that other deer can come in contact with and then contract the disease. So, I think we're only at the tip of the iceberg with what's going to happen with CWD, and unfortunately, hunters are being impacted, across the whitetails range now, with that, loss of privileges in areas that have CWD, lose the ability to either bait or feed or use minerals, do baited camera surveys, longer seasons. Deer season essentially, as it, is over, because in most cases they try to dramatically reduce those deer herds, sharpshooting programs, all kinds of other stuff, that negatively impact hunters. So there's going to be a lot of new challenges the hunters are going to have to deal with if you live in an area that has that disease.
Yeah, it's a scary thing when you see these stories pop up. Seems like once every week or two, another couple deer found with CWD in this state or that state, and it just seems like slowly that continues to slowly snowball. And like you said, I think we're still at that tip of the iceberg, but if ever we reach a tipping point, that's something that's pretty concerning.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
So keeping the good times rolling then.
Yeah.
How about predators, Kip? How much of an issue do you believe the predator, the increase in predation across many states is? How big of an issue is that, and who are the culprits there, if that is a big issue?
It certainly is a big issue. And I will say this, so this kind of goes back to something we talked about earlier, where the state agencies and the hunters are on this. Hunters view predation as a huge issue. State agencies ranked it very low as an issue impacting their management, which really surprised me given all of the current research out there right now showing the negative impacts that the predators are having on fawn survival. My personal opinion is that predators are a natural part of the environment. We're lucky to have them. It's good that we have them. But at the same time, they need to be managed just like deer or anything else. Mm-hmm. And, in areas where we have too many, they should be, reduced. Whether that's through additional hunting seasons or additional trapping seasons or whatever, it's just part of the whole thing. I think any wildlife management, the key to being successful is to keep, whether it's deer or bear or coyote or bobcat or whatever it is, those populations in line with what the habitat can support. So I think that we're in an area today where we're seeing expanding predator populations, particularly coyotes in the southeast where they haven't been for all that long. Deer haven't reacted to it yet, and there's lots of research showing that coyotes are absolutely pounding fawns to the point where we have extremely low fawn recruitment rates, extremely low. We have lots of northern deer herds that have dealt with coyotes for a long time. But we have some northern herds now that are dealing with expanding populations of bears, and bears are very good at eating fawns in the spring. We have some northern deer herds dealing with wolves, and obviously wolves are very good at killing deer. So as hunters, I think this is just part of the new normal where, hey, we have something else out there that's removing some of our deer. So the number of antlers that we need to take during the hunting season needs to be less to accommodate for some of this. But at the same time, in those areas where predators are more than they should be or are too high, I think it's our duty to reduce some of those to acceptable levels so that you have healthy predator populations as well as healthy prey populations. So I think we just need to find that balance.
Yeah, when it comes, you use the word balance, and I can't help but to think that humans have gotten in the way of nature. So, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm good at jumping to conclusions. But Iowa introduced deer to the state from Michigan, I believe, like in the 70s or 80s. Is that correct?
I'm not sure when they did. Most states restocked deer from some other state, during the 1900s. I don't know the exact date that Iowa did or specifically where they came from, but it's safe to say they did bring some in from somewhere.
Gotcha. So now what we've done is we've brought in something that may or may not have been to the area a long time ago.
Well, Dan,
And
though, I think the key point with that, reintroduced.
yeah,
Like
reintroduced.
deer have been across almost the entire North American continent for thousands of years, but we
Right.
just decimated them at one point to the point where we had to reintroduce.
Right. So how much is whether or not we brought it to an extinction level way back in the day and then reintroduced these animals into this habitat that may have not been the same that they were living in previously. And then now we're seeing an effect all the way until today that is almost impossible to find a balancing act.
No, I think that we definitely can find a balancing act. I don't think it really matters, where deer would have been brought there from. You could bring deer from Texas there or Florida, put them in that environment, in a pretty short period of time. They would do very well, if given the habitat that they need. You certainly have the food available through most of the year. So, give them cover, give them habitat, and they'll do well. They'll thrive in that. So, Iowa has some of the most productive habitat, on the face of the planet. And that's why it had, way too many deer for so many years. So, I think the balance there is just a matter of, okay, we're trying to reduce deer herds. They're doing that. And they were doing that at a rate that was working extremely well with all of the model data that the DNR had, until you throw in all of these other factors, such as this huge loss of habitat, predators, disease, et cetera. So it just changes the model. So it takes a little bit of time to recalibrate it. And I just think we're just in that recalibration mode right now, where, the DNR will certainly get it right. They have some very smart people there and some extremely talented deer biologists, so they know how to do it. It's just a matter of using the most current data to do it. So, I don't think Iowa's dead in the water by any means. It's just, things are a little different there now than they've been lately. They certainly will get it right, but seeing things like this where how far the harvest has dropped, and listening to hunters, that's just all part of the process. So, okay, now we'll back off on our antlerless harvest. We'll solve this issue. We'll get, do what we can to put some habitat back out there, and man, Iowa will be rocking again. I'm completely confident.
So with the data that you're collecting and historical data, are we seeing trends that could potentially help us prepare for the future?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And particularly given that, it wasn't that long ago where we didn't think we could slow deer herds down. Now we've clearly shown, hey, we can. We know how to do this now, or what it takes to get in front of those growth curves. So, so this data is all very important for, average hunter to the average landowner, right up to the natural resource professionals who can use it within their state to do, or to be successful at reaching their goals.
That's good.
So we've talked here, Kip, about a lot of issues of concern. Habitat loss, disease, predation, possible overharvest. There's plenty of things to be, potentially wary of and concerned about. We've touched on a handful of different adjustments that maybe we as hunters can make, or agencies can make, or someone else. I'm curious if, again, we're looking at the 30,000-foot overview here. If you had to look at the overall state of whitetails and the concerns facing them, and then choose 2 or 3 actionable next steps, like 2 or 3 potential solutions, what do you think those top steps should be from your perspective?
I think by far the top step is engagement of hunters by our state wildlife agencies, getting our hunters and our state folks to sit down together to get on the same page and to share information. I think we can solve any issue with the solid partnerships there. And conversely, I think we will fail miserably at everything we try to do if we don't work together. So I think that is by far the biggest thing that we need to do. And the beauty of it is it's entirely accomplishable.
Absolutely. Definitely today, especially with new social media and different ways to open those communication lines even easier than before.
Absolutely.
Now, here's the big one, money. So reduced hunters means hunting companies aren't making money. Iowa has seen a decrease in over a 10-year period in the state budget for DNR officers. the influence some of these organizations have towards the, like you mentioned, the non-hunters, the hunters, the agencies and whatnot. How much does money influence some of these decisions?
Money's a huge driver of it, mostly because the vast majority of the states don't get any general fund money, which means that most state wildlife agencies are funded entirely by license revenues, and $100. And then those are matched by PR funds, from the federal government on excise tax for hunting that stuff. So that's why we say, that hunters drive the system and they pay for all of our wildlife management programs. All of the game species, all the non-game species management, that's almost all on the backs of game wildlife. And, the vast majority of that comes right from the backs of deer. So money plays a huge role in that. And as you get fewer hunters, that's fewer license dollars, which means there's less money for wildlife agency budgets. And that's also why things like CWD that take money away from good programs like hunter access programs or buying land or research and funnels it into CWD surveillance and CWD monitoring, that kills us as hunters. We're starting with a small pool of money anyway, and then taking it and putting it, it's not unnecessarily because you have to monitor the disease, but it's just unfortunate that it has to be funneled into those areas. So money drives, all of this. And, I don't think that you have agencies out there making decisions specifically to increase money. Hey, let's sell more non-resident licenses or let's sell more of this or that, at the expense of the resource. I do not believe that's happening, or at least not happening at a very high level, because those states are accountable for those. But not to say it's never happened, but I don't think that's it may be the exception way more than the rule. So, but money certainly plays in, to their line of thinking with a lot of stuff because it has to. They're not a business like, we see on the street, and it's a good thing because most state wildlife agencies would be out of business very quickly if they had to run, or operate like business. But they at least need to, to use some of those principles. So certainly money factors into the discussion, but it's not the driving factor in most cases.
Interesting. That makes all the sense in the world. So I do want to start wrapping this up here. We've talked about a lot of different challenges. We've talked a lot about, where things are now in comparison to where they were maybe 10 years ago. And Kip, as you know, I've been involved in this discussion and a part of this, but I'm curious from your perspective, can you tell us a little bit about the National Deer Alliance? I've talked about it a bit here already, but this was formed, this past summer in response to a lot of these issues we've been talking about today. From your perspective, can you tell us and the listeners a little bit about, how you think the National Deer Alliance is going to be working to address some of these things, and why is the NDA, why has it been created?
No, absolutely. And I'm very optimistic about that. I think that's one of the bright spots on the horizon for deer hunters, mostly because this has the opportunity to be the largest group of deer hunting advocates ever assembled, by far. And in a world where science means less to wildlife management today than at any point during my career, because politics plays a far bigger role, deer hunters and state wildlife agencies more than ever need a strong advocate. And NDA can fill that. That's exactly what it's created to be. Less than 1% of hunters in the United States belong to a national deer organization. Less than 1%. And partly because deer have just been so plentiful for so long, we've just taken them for granted. We haven't combined our efforts to protect them. You can take a look at turkey hunters or pheasant hunters or duck hunters or elk hunters, and anywhere between 8 and 40% of them belong to an organization, but less than 1% of deer hunters do. Well, the NDA is going to change that. To where you can put 8, 9, 10% or more of deer hunters together. If we do that, that would be well over 1 million deer hunters. So where I have an opportunity to get quick information to folks on advocacy issues like, hey, we're trying to, lose Sunday hunting in your state, or they're trying to remove this opportunity for hunters, or hunters, rights are being infringed upon here. Think about how big of an impact we could have if we could get information in these hunters' hands very quickly, such that they could let their state agencies or legislators know, hey, I disagree with this, or conversely, hey, I support this. So there has never been a movement for deer hunters like this in the past. So this is a very, very positive thing. The fact that it's free to deer hunters, it doesn't cost you anything to sign up. It's just a bonus. It makes it that much easier. So a lot of these issues that we talked about where agencies aren't listening to hunters or agencies are having to fight with politicians for bad wildlife laws they're trying to put in place, as hunters, we can solve almost all of this. And I think the NDA is the perfect vehicle to make that happen.
Yeah, I would second everything you said there, and I'm really excited about what's happening there. And like you said, there's a lot of opportunity to service a need that's really out there, especially given these things that are affecting deer and deer hunters across the country today. So it's one of those things that the National Deer Alliance is getting its feet underneath it, but I think there's some really exciting things to come in the future, and I'm excited to personally to be involved in that, and I'm glad that people like you are helping out too, Kip. And speaking of exciting things to come, the North American Deer Summit is coming this spring, and that's something we haven't talked about here yet on the podcast, but I know some details are starting to emerge about that, and you've been involved. Kip, can you tell us a little bit about what the North American Deer Summit is and why people might want to get involved with that?
Sure. This past year, 2014, was the inaugural Deer Summit, and it's the first time that the deer stakeholders from a whole bunch of different groups sat down together. There's lots of times where state agencies meet or hunters meet or trade shows meet, but there had never been a meeting where folks from all of these had sat down to really address these issues of deer hunting. So that was a very successful meeting, and what came out of that was the need to create an umbrella organization that could speak on behalf of all deer hunters, hence the National Deer Alliance. That's where that came from. So then they said, okay, this is great. And they said, all right, now, one of the things we did at that meeting was identified the top 10 issues impacting deer hunting and management. So we have those. But when we got down, attendees said, hey, we need another summit next year, which is the one that's this year in 2015, to address these issues and say, okay, let's get some specific action items. So that's really what this year's summit is about. So May 6th to the 8th in Louisville, Kentucky, we were going to be sitting down again with people from all these different stakeholder groups. And the cool thing about this year, Mark, is that it's open to the public. Last year it was a very restricted attendee list because of the size of the facility we were at. We don't have those confinements this year, so anybody can come. They still will be divided into one of 6 or 7 different stakeholder groups, and it's very interactive. They get to vote on what's happening, and what we're going to do is we're going to give them, hey, here are the 10 issues from last year that we identified as the biggest ones. Pick 4 of these that you want the NDA to specifically address first and move forward with coming up with specific action items that they can do to address them and to help solve them. So there's going to be some prepared talks on some of the big issues that are going on, but a lot of the summit is interactive where you're not just going to go and sit and kind of listen. You will be involved in the future of deer hunting and management. There's never been an opportunity for hunters to be more empowered on what's going to happen in the summer or the spring. So it's a great opportunity for folks to go, have their say, and and have a big impact on what they get to hunt during the rest of their life, as well as what their kids get to hunt. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that too. And I think to your point earlier about the fact that we need to be taking advantage of these opportunities to engage when the agency or the whatever it might be is asking for feedback from hunters. Well, here is an amazing opportunity for hunters to get involved, to have their voices heard, to interact with people, like you said, from all these different stakeholders. I mean, how often would I get the chance that an average deer hunter sit down and talk to a biologist or someone in the industry or a media representative or, someone from an advocacy or conservation group and hear all the different perspectives on, what are the solutions for some of these issues, or what are the problems, or what are the things we need to be moving forward on. I think it's going to be really interesting to hear all these different things, to interact with all these different people, and like you said, to have a real stake in what happens moving forward. So I will be sure to get information in the show notes for anyone listening. If you want more information about the North American Deer Summit, go to wiredtohunt.com/episode 41. And they'll have a link there that can drive you to a website with all the details about the summit, how to register, what else to look forward to. I think there's some really neat things that are going to be going on there that are directly relevant to the conversation we've been having here today. So that said, Kip, we are coming up on time, and we've taken a lot of time out of your day. So I want to thank you for spending this last hour with us discussing whitetails.
Oh, absolutely. It was good talking with you, and I can tell you, listeners, too, if any of them are interested in the whitetail report that we discussed throughout this time, It's going to be available on our website next week, so it'll be there. It's free to take. Anybody can go and grab it and take a look at how their state compares to others and see what these big issues are and what folks are doing to address them.
Absolutely. I think it's a really tremendous resource you guys have been putting out there. And like you mentioned, it's a free download. You can download a PDF right now really easily. And I will make sure to include that link as well in the show notes. And just so everyone knows, the past Whitetail reports are available to download too. And so like you mentioned, Kip, I think there's been five of them maybe now?
Well, we started in 2009, so we got, it doesn't seem like it's gone that quickly, but yeah, we got quite a few of them there now. And each year, it's the different issues that are leading the charge. So, folks can take a look at what was the biggest thing in 2009 and then 10 and each year. So, if you're a deer nut, you're going to like those reports. I promise you.
Yeah, I can concur. Based on my own experience digging into those, it's a tremendous resource. Tons of information, tons of not just trends and data, but then you guys provide some really great resources and stories and articles related to different research or different studies and even hunting advice and a whole bunch of different things. I've really enjoyed them. So I definitely recommend everyone listening to check out the past issues, and then definitely next week when the 2015 report comes out, check that out for sure. So I think that's going to be it for us, Kip. Thank you so much.
All right. Great talking to you guys. Have a good day.
You too, Kip. All right. Well, there you have it. Things are definitely getting interesting these days in the whitetail world. But remember, you can get involved and help promote positive change. And I'd encourage you to get involved with organizations like the National Deer Alliance, the QDMA, or Whitetails Unlimited, and find ways that you can help the cause. And as we discussed, definitely look into the North American Deer Summit too. Now for show notes and links to all the different resources and organizations we've discussed, visit wiredtohunt.com/episode 41. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to the Wired to Hunt podcast on iTunes, the Apple Podcast app, or the Stitcher app if you use Android, so you'll get all the future episodes downloaded right to your phone or tablet. Also, if you've enjoyed this show, I'd encourage you to leave a rating or review on iTunes. It's a huge help, so thank you for doing that. And speaking of thank yous, we'd also like to thank our partners who help make this show possible. Big thanks to Sitka Gear, Trophy Ridge, Bear Archery, Redneck Blinds, Carbon Express Arrows, Huntsoft, Lacrosse Boots, Big & J Long Range Attractants, and the Whitetail Institute of North America. And finally, thanks to you for joining us today. With all of us hunters working together to protect and promote deer and deer hunting, I'm excited to see the great things we can accomplish in 2015. So get involved, let your voice be heard, and stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase.
Outdoor adventure won't wait for engine problems. Things like hard starts, rough performance, and lost fuel economy are often caused by fuel gum and varnish buildup. Seafoam can help your engine run better and last longer. You simply pour a can into your gas tank. Hunters and anglers rely on Seafoam to keep their engines running the way it should the entire season. So pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.